Hello and welcome to our continuing series of webinars that are focusing on those best practices for closing the pandemic in our Ohio schools. This webinar tonight will focus on how our educators are dealing with that learning gap issue that created for our students because of the pandemic. And this is focusing on our students that are wrapping up high school and heading on into college. We have a great lineup of panelists tonight that will address this issue during this hour-long webinar. My name is Jeff Good. I'm the Chief Education Technology Officer for PBS Western Reserve located in Kent, Ohio. We are fortunate to have received funding for these webinars through the Broadcast Educational Media Commission in collaboration with the Ohio Department of Education. All of our webinars, as you look at the webinar tonight, or you might want to look at the three other webinars that we did that focused on how our elementary schools are dealing with the pandemic learning gap, our middle schools, and our high schools, can all be found on our website that you see. Follow that URL at the bottom of your screen. Hey, we're on YouTube Live tonight, so if you're attending this live event via YouTube, take an opportunity to drop your question in chat, and I'll make sure that we get it to our panelists. But if you also have any questions and you don't want to go through YouTube Live, just use your phone, click on the QR code that you see on the corner of your screen, and that'll take you to a Google form, and you can import your name and your quick question, and we'll make sure that we get those to your panelists. So let's get started, won't we? Don't we? And we're once again dealing with the pandemic learning gap for our high school students that are heading on into college. Our first panelist tonight is Sandy Ferrano. She is the director of the Mahoning Valley Regional Council of Governments, and she's also the Career Counseling Services at the Educational Service Center of Eastern Ohio. Our second panelist is Rob Eggleston. He's the lead career counselor for the ESC of Eastern Ohio. We're pleased to have George Lesnansky with us. He's our high school and middle school teacher, as well as the coordinator of the Makerspace at Brookfield Local Schools. And finally, last but not least, we have Josh Kramer, and he is our Education and Workforce Director for America Makes. We're excited about having these panelists in place, but before we start, we want to kind of take a step back, and it's hard to believe it's been 2 years. But in the fall of 2020, many of our students and families and schools really took a different look as the pandemic really reshaped that educational backdrop. Community colleges, which educate about 40% of the U.S. Undergrads, they were really stretched thin. So now their enrollment in 2021 as well as 2022 is expected to increase as students and workers change their plans. So let's take a closer look at how Maryland's Montgomery College and its students coped with pandemic changes.
Now, the first in a special series of reports about rethinking college during COVID. Many students, families, and of course, colleges and universities are reconsidering what this fall will be like as the pandemic continues to dramatically reshape the education landscape. Our series begins with community colleges, which educate about 40% of undergraduates in the U.S. Many were already stretched thin before the pandemic, but surveys indicate enrollment is likely to increase as students and workers shift plans. Correspondent Hari Srinivasan looks at how one community college and its students are coping.
Maryland's Montgomery College, just outside D.C., is eerily quiet these days. During a typical July, the school's 3 campuses would be bustling with summer school students, but like so many colleges and universities around the country, learning here has shifted from classrooms and labs to bedrooms and living rooms. Good. Montgomery College is one of the country's most diverse community colleges. It's nestled in a county with pockets of poverty and wealth. About 55,000 students ordinarily attend for accredited degrees and other programs like workforce development. The school was one of the first in the area to announce it will continue remote learning in the fall with a limited number of small lab classes. It's too early to know how many will attend next year, but the school is already seeing an uptick in interest.
If I look at my enrollment for summer, we'll probably be about 20% up in terms of where we were this time last year.
Darianne Pollard is president of the college. She says as the school gears up for increased enrollment, she's staying focused on current students, many of whom were struggling before the pandemic.
So our students oftentimes are hungry. They are taking care of multiple generations at any given time. They're trying to figure out how to get to school. Many of them live very fragile lives, and they're oftentimes one paycheck away from disaster.
In March, that disaster struck when businesses began to close. Many students and their families lost jobs, and some struggled with the move to online learning. That was the case for 19-year-old graphic design major Kayla Savoy. She says she enjoys creating and learning about art in her classes, but technology issues and distractions at home made it difficult to stay focused on school.
The Wi-Fi, absolutely atrocious at my house. There's technically 5 or 6 of us all living at once. You have a toddler screaming about Paw Patrol in the background while your 8 a.m. classes is going on.
Savoy is paying her own way through school and says she managed to get straight A's last semester, but she's been struggling to find work the last few months, and it's been hard to pay for things like gas and food. On top of those concerns, she and many of her classmates have been deeply impacted by recent events surrounding racial inequities.
I got to this point where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to juggle more than I already have. And then I turn around and I see more senseless killings of my people. And as a Black woman, I fear for so many of people that are important in my life. It becomes just an overwhelming feeling of what can I do? Can I not study for classes? Can I not go to the store without my life being in danger?
Montgomery College has been trying to help students cope with many of these stresses. The school has distributed more than $3.5 million in emergency aid, money from the Federal CARES Act, private donors, established emergency funds, and $400,000 the school saved from canceled end-of-the-year ceremonies. Early on, local companies donated laptops, and free food was handed out to students in the surrounding community, where unemployment has jumped up in recent months to nearly 9%.
Our students, they don't pop in for 8 or 9 months out of a year and live in a residence hall and they go back to where they came from. They live here. They work here. They raise families here. So as a result of that, the wealth and health of our community is a direct reflection of the health of our community college and vice versa. There's a mutuality to that that demands that we rise up in these moments.
Black Lives Matter!
Pollard says this moment also requires thoughtful engagement and action by the school and academia in general to address systemic racism. During open Zoom forums called Let's Talk, faculty and staff have been facilitating candid conversations.
We're literally watching the murder of people consistently on television over and over and over again. That's not only dehumanizing to the person, but it desensitizes us to what the value of that life is.
And some faculty, like anthropology adjunct professor Amy Caratini, are encouraging students to explore race and ethnicity in new ways.
I think it's just so important to make students comfortable to talk about these issues. I think there's a lot of nervousness or fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing.
But outside of the classroom, some wonder how well Montgomery College and other community colleges will be able to meet the challenges of these times.
Community colleges have been systematically defunded for years, and they were already in a tough situation when it came to resources, when it came to instructional supports, when it came to being ready to serve these large number of students.
Temple University's Sarah Goldrick-Rabb is a professor of sociology and medicine. She and her colleagues recently released a survey that found nearly 3 in 5 college students across the country have experienced basic needs insecurity during the pandemic. She says lack of funding can lead to staff shortages and limited course offerings, and the current job market may make it more difficult for students to get across the finish line.
These students are at very high risk of going to college for all the right reasons and leaving because they had very little choice. People used to work their way through college in the 1970s and the 1980s. They've always done that. But now work has literally disappeared. This is not a temporary challenge. When these people, if they drop out of college, they're going to struggle for the next 10 to 15 years at least to repay the debt that they owe.
Montgomery College President Pollard has those issues and others on her plate as she steers the college into what could be a rocky fall.
If students do come to us, they will need financial aid. We know that the state and even the federal government may not be able to provide as much because they're trying to raise an economy back up. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty, but here's the thing about it. We've been here before. Community colleges have a deep competency in trying to respond to these types of environments.
55,000 students, more or less, will log into their online classes on August 31st when the fall semester begins. But the school's campuses will remain quiet for the foreseeable future. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Hari Srinivasan.
You know, it's hard to believe that that's been the amount of time that has passed since that, but those concerns are still there, and especially when we look at our panelists on tonight's webinar that have really been working with our high school students that are anticipating during the pandemic their move into college. So our first panelist this evening is Sandy Ferrano. She's the director of the Mahoning Valley Regional Council of Governments and the Career Counseling Services at the Educational Service Center of Eastern Ohio. She received a degree in applied science and computer information systems from Youngstown State University. Sandy joined the Mahoning County Educational Service Center, now the Educational Service Center of Eastern Ohio, in October of 2016 as a lead career counselor. She has more than 20 years of professional experience in the field of adult education in a variety of roles, including customized training coordinator, developing and implementing adult career programs, and supervising adult education staff and instructors. In October 2019, Sandy became the director of the Mahoning Valley Regional Council of Governments and the Career Counseling Services. Sandy also leads the Mahoning Valley Business Advisory Council, the BAC, and that's supported by the ESC of Eastern Ohio and more than 25 school districts. Sandy, thanks so much for being part of our conversation. And as we look at what your folks did and what you did with the ESC, and we'll have Rob on here in a moment, you know, you had to deal with some very special cases there when you, as a career counselor, and kids that were students rather, that were in high school and contemplating a career in college. You want to talk about what all that you did there?
Sure. So, you know, as career counselors and leading the career counseling team, we're always doing career exploration with our students. We start that basically about the 6th grade level all the way up until they're seniors. But as the pandemic hit and realizing that students might need industry recognized credentials to graduate, we started implementing those type of credentials in the homeschool, because we know not all schools or all students want to go to a career and tech school. So working with my lead career counselor, Robcleston, we in our BAC, we have implemented the building skilled trades course in about 10 school districts that we service. And what's nice about this curriculum, it is, it could be in classroom or online. We actually got a grant that supports this program. So with the grant, it provided a learning management system that teachers and students could access from online. It came with course material, and it also provided toolkits that they could take home if need be to work on these projects. And just recently, now we're working with Youngstown State. We have partnered with them through a grant that we're offering industry recognized credentials, again, online. Most of it is online. If there's any lab work to be done, the YSU Excellent Training Center provides that lab work. But most of what we're implementing, there's an in-person option and an online option to help these students with graduation, and not only graduation and receiving an industry recognized credential, but getting them on a pathway for a career after high school graduation.
Talk a bit, if you would, and I kind of know the story, but you can fill in the audience. You know, obviously the career counselors were in place prior to the pandemic, correct?
Yes.
So how did you, as a group, kind of pivot a little bit when the pandemic hit, and did the needs of those students change?
Sure. So career counseling actually started in 2016, like you said, prior to the pandemic. And career counseling was first put in place because the Ohio Department of Education graduation requirements were changing, and we were basically brought on to track end of course points and ACT scores, and if anybody was getting industry recognized credentials, and and of course testing. And then we had career exploration going, and we were doing job shadows. So when the career counselor, or when the pandemic hit, we knew we had to pivot, and still help our students and still help our school districts. So what we did is we partnered with Junior Achievement, and we did a lot of online virtual career exploration courses where students from that 6th grade to 12th grade level can get on, actually talk to professionals live, just like we're doing tonight, talk to them about their profession, what a day looks like. And we did like actual virtual tours of those different facilities or those different speakers. One that comes to my mind is a chiropractor he was on, and he had a lot of photos he shared. He gave a tour of his office. So even though they weren't able to be in person, it was more of an in-person vibe, I guess you would say, than just reading about it online. So we tried to bring as much as we could to them virtually and live. And again, our Business Advisory Council always does an amazing job in working with us. They're a huge partnership. They are really a reason for a lot of our initiatives that we work so well with together. And that's when the Building Trades came about, where we started working with them and putting on the Skilled Trades Expo, which led us to be able to work with Ohio Carpenters Association, located in Richfield, Ohio, with their curriculum and allowing it to be, online or in person. Now, to be honest, with a lot of the grants that we seek now, there is always a part of that grant that is looking to fill that gap, and what can we do online with the students. So it has really changed our way of thinking.
Talk a moment about, I know you're working with Youngstown State, and you may have touched on it a bit, but that Excellence Training Center,
Yes.
what's your connection with that and your career counselor program?
Oh, so a grant came up. We had been talking to YSU's Workforce Development Center about the programs that they have on their Skills Accelerator online programs. And these programs really focus on manufacturing, information technology, business. And since we were kind of looking for different pathways for students, they reached out to us and said, would you like to partner? They had the programs. We had our foot in the door to these school districts. And it was just perfect coincidence that at that time a grant came available that allowed us to really make that partnership stronger. We applied for the grant, we received that grant, and right now we're in the works of meeting with school districts, meeting with students, and these are really industry recognized credentials that can lead right to a career. We're talking about CompTIA, A+ certification, Security Plus, getting into manufacturing certifications. And this grant's going to help those students not only do the online coursework, but sit for their certification exam and lead them to hopefully a job. And that's what we're working on now, is making partners for these different pathways to be a mentor for those students. And then what's nice is the Excellence Training Center is also a part of this workforce development. And then that's where they go in and they do the lab work. And if anybody hasn't been at the Excellence Training Center, it's pretty phenomenal facility. I mean, we have the FANUC robots. They have labs set up for electronics and electricity and just about anything that you can imagine to get that hands-on experience for those online classes before going in to that career.
So it certainly sounds like, one of, I think, your major role, as you've expressed, is, as that career counseling service, is the services obviously that you're providing your students, but it certainly sounds like you've done a lot of collaboration and finding different groups that you can collaborate with. Any, insider things on the horizon on some new collaborative efforts that we might hear coming out from the career counselors at the ESC of Eastern Ohio?
Yeah, so one thing, and we just kind of piloted a little bit a couple weeks ago, we're working on a mock interview boot camp. We just had one. It was kind of our pilot run. It was just for seniors. really, we talk about getting them industry recognized credentials. We talk about online programs. We talk about pathways, but we all know that they have to pass that interview process to get into those fields. So the mock interview boot camp, in collaboration with our BAC, wanted to get together and put on a live event where seniors came in person, and we talked about answering those difficult interview questions, how to dress, what questions to have prepared, how to answer those questions, how employers are looking at your social media now, what not to post, what to post, if you press that delete button on that, inappropriate picture, it doesn't go away. And it could be used as a reference when they're doing reference checks to hire you. We got into background checks and drug screens. And it was, for all the attendees that came, they really enjoyed it. I thought, the resources and the speakers were great. And at the end, we actually did some mock interviews with students. They came up on stage and they had a little interview in front of a crowd just to kind of test out the waters a little. So coming up next school year, January 2023, we hope to do that again. We're going to change some things up a little bit to make it more active. And then another thing we're looking at is trying to come up with some assistance for students to get their license, their driver's license. We're finding now that driver's ed, a lot of students can't afford to pay for the private classes, because I know when I went to school, driver's ed was part of school, and it's not like that anymore. And, a lot of times you have to pay privately for driver's lessons or to drive and the classes, and it could be from $400 on up. So in a couple weeks here, again, with our career counseling team and our BAC, we're going to come together and see what we can do, to bring some solutions to the kids and get those driver's license, because, to go to a job shadow, to go to a pre-apprenticeship, if they're doing the YSU online classes, they got to get to the Excellence Training Center to do their lab work, just trying to help them find a way to get there.
Sandy, it sounds like some exciting things that you all have done as you pivoted, helping those students, prior to the pandemic, and then looking and noticing the differences that your students were dealing with. A lot of the same needs, but you had to kind of find a way to work through that. So really appreciate your input as was one of our panelists tonight. And sounds like you're doing some exciting things with your career counselors.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much. Our next panelist is Robcleston. He began work at the Mahoning County Educational Service Center in 2018. And if you didn't catch up on the last time, that's also now being called the ESC of Eastern Ohio. He was a career counselor, and he was promoted to the lead career counselor in 2019. Projects that Rob has worked on is focused on the development and implementation of programs for career education, career readiness, graduation. He's participated in multiple projects with Mahoning Valley Business Advisory Council to develop and maintain a connection between those Mahoning Valley schools and the local agencies and local business leaders. He's developed and presented at multiple local professional development sessions on navigating and implementing that graduation plans, those industry recognized credentials that Sandy spoke of, and career readiness skills in the middle and high school levels. He's a member of the planning committee for the Mahoning Valley Skill. I don't know where he finds all this time. Valley Skilled Trades Expo, consisting of representatives from 18 building trades and numerous local construction-based businesses. He's participated and helped organize multiple large-scale career-based events to include Educator in the Workplace, which I had an opportunity to attend, which was outstanding. The MCESC Career Bus Tour, the MCESC Virtual Career Expo. You can go on and on and on and on. Rob has been a very busy guy. He earned his bachelor's degree in special education with licensure in mild to moderate and moderate to intensive disabilities from Youngstown State University in 2013, and then earned a master's degree in educational administration and leadership at YSU in 2021. And I salute you, Rob, because you're also a 6-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. We appreciate your service, honorably discharged as a sergeant in 2011. He served 2 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Rob, we're so excited about having you as part of our panelists. And as Sandy talked about the career counselors, and certainly sounds like you're quite busy with keeping that rolling. It sounds like your feet are on the ground in relation to those career counselors. Tell us a little bit about what goes on in the field as you're working with these folks.
Well, coming back from the pandemic last year, there was a lot of changes in the schools. We were used to pre-pandemic times of students always being in the school district, not having to worry about the virtual and the computers and all that. Now that's all changed. Had about 2 years of that lapse where we're finding that students are having to readjust back into the classroom. But one great thing about that is the students, probably unknowingly, developed really good technology skills while they were in there. So when we're looking at some of the systems that they're using, such as the Google Classrooms and the Google Docs and Sheets and all that, they far surpassed us, those that weren't in school at that time, on using those different platforms.
So talk a bit about your activity when you talk about, you talked a little bit about career-based activities. And I know that the state's really pushing, and Sandy talked a bit about that career exploration. What role are you playing with that, and what are you seeing from the students that you're working with in that idea of career exploration?
Well, a couple of years ago, they started to transition the graduation requirements to more career-based. I'm a huge fan of this. It's really taking that college and career-based education and really leveling it out for both sides. Once we saw that about 4 years ago when this was coming down the pipe, working with different school administrators and teachers, we kind of decided we got to start attacking this now. So at those early, the elementary school, middle school levels, we really started getting into the exploration activities. The dress-up days, the interactive videos. Those ended up turning out to be pretty great during the pandemic, having the Zoom videos there. Bringing career speakers into the classroom, just anything we could do to introduce these different careers to students who may not have been able to see those before. Looking at some of the high school type things, we talked a little bit about industry recognized credentials and how those play a part. Really, those play a major part in what we're trying to do, as in helping a student develop a career pathway. So what we oftentimes do, Ohio developed these new Ohio graduation plans and at-risk plans that need to be developed for every student after 8th grade. So what we do is identify career areas that the student is interested in and help them find pathways that they can complete while they're in high school. So by the time they graduate, they're ready to go. Now, those pathways can include something where they go directly to work after high school. So say it'd be something in the manufacturing field, and we get them connected with a local manufacturer and credentials that can assist in getting them there, getting them hired once they graduate. Or if it's a college track that they're looking for, we not only try to prepare them for the career they're going to college for, but also for going to college. That could be anything through ACT remediation or ACT test prep, but also looking at some of those certifications and things that would tie into what they actually want to do when they graduate college. So we're looking 5-10 years down the road sometimes with these students.
So Rob, now we're going to put you on the spot because you shared with us some pictures. And what we're going to do is I'm going to throw those up on the screen. And if you just want to give some quick explanations, we'll kind of step through each of these. And we've tried different ways on different webinars, and I think this works the best, is let the folks talk a little bit about their passion in their pictures. So
this is from the Skilled Trades Expo, and this event was phenomenal. It's we had about 5,000 students from, I think it was between 50 and 52 school districts that came out to it. Combined, that was both years that we've had this. That was the pre-pandemic year and the post-pandemic year that we've done it. And what they're doing is they're actually getting to play with heavy equipment. Here's a tour. One of the greatest accomplishments I think we had. Those are all administrators, educators, guidance counselors down at the Ohio Carpenters Joint Apprenticeship, Ohio Carpenters Training Center. So they went and took a tour. Here's one of our teachers laying some block at the Skilled Trades Expo. And these are students in our newly developed building trades classes. This one's here is Springfield High School. Also at Springfield High School, students learning how to use the jigsaw. And some cornhole boards that were created by students at Brookfield High School. I actually got a set of those. I was pretty excited. This is United Local, one of our pilot districts for the for building trades here. Showing off some of their projects they completed. Another great project, the Octagon Picnic Table, the infamous Octagon Picnic Table. This was a group of educators that we had come down to America Makes, and you're going to hear from Josh Kramer later on today, later on the broadcast here, talking about some of the things that we're doing with America Makes, bringing educators and manufacturers together in our area. So this turned out to be a great event.
And Rob, where was this event, the America Makes event? That was a local event, or?
Yes, that was held in downtown Youngstown with America Makes, and they really talked about the different forms of manufacturing, some different programs that they had out there that they can really incorporate straight into the schools. This is a picture from one of the first groups of students to go through the Stop the Bleed program, which is it's very similar to like a first aid type program. Potentially save a life. So we love seeing those. This is from the interview skills boot camp that we recently had. Students kind of parting the sea for one of the activities they were doing. And we're back in America Makes now. This is one of our groups of teachers that signed up to do some of the additive edge program. I apologize. The additive edge program with America Makes, and they're going to be incorporating those directly into the schools. This is a group of students that went and toured the Excellence Training Center down at YSU, and also from the Excellence Training Center. Looking at some robots, they actually, one of the great things about that, if you want to back up real quick, if you're able to, that same robot, they have one that's almost a clone of that. So one of the great things that, and if you can look behind the students, where the big yellow ones, the students are actually going to have I guess you'd say like somewhat of a miniature version of that same robot, to where they're going to be learning how to program it, learning how to run it, to where essentially these students are going to come out of high school certified, ready, and able to run those same robots. And also down at the Excellence Training Center.
Rob, it sounds, both you and Sandy, I don't know where you find the time in the day, in all honesty, but really appreciate all the work and appreciate you be here and talking about how you're working with those students. I love the idea that those career counselors in that program are really helping those students, but also you, like everyone else, when times change and we had that I call it the black hole of the pandemic, your folks were there to still be there to help those students and help them move into a career path. So I can't thank you enough for that, and appreciate all the work that you and Sandy have been doing. And I guess I'll just say keep up the good work. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And I can't jump off without saying, if not for people like George Lesnansky, who's coming on next, and Josh Kramer is coming on, we wouldn't be able to pull off any of these things that we've done. So they've been excellent partners. George is phenomenal in his classroom, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
It's really interesting. Our CEO here uses the term, you found someone with peanut butter and someone with chocolate, and you made a Reese's cup. And so it sounds like that collaboration side, you've made a lot of Reese's cups over the last year or so. So certainly appreciate that work. So thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you.
So let's take a break just for a minute. It's been a brutal year for higher education, obviously, and enrollment is down. And we're talking about the fall of 2021 and into 2022, down by about more than 500,000 undergraduate students compared to what it was in 2019. But there's been at least one area of growth at many schools, and those are those short-term programs that help students gain new skills for the workforce very quickly. So let's take a closer look on the ongoing series, Rethinking College.
One area hit by COVID is higher education. According to our partners at USA Facts, 36% of households cancel plans for higher education due to the pandemic as of last month. But there's one area of growth, short-term programs to develop skills for the workforce quickly. All right, Srinivasan reports in this last chapter of our series, Rethinking College.
When I was in Africa, I was going to college and the terrorists attacked my country and they destroyed everything.
When Amina Abdullahi came to study in the U.S. from the West African nation of Niger, she had a big goal, become a computer scientist, a PhD no less. Only problem?
I didn't know anything about computers. I couldn't even use Microsoft, the basic that even middle school people use to submit homework.
A big obstacle, especially since she also didn't speak English. But Amina has always had a strategy for getting what she wants, She takes things one step at a time.
This year I will learn English. Next year I will do my GED. Next year I will start college.
In just 4 years, Abdullah is already working here, Wall Street. She's enrolled in a program called Year Up and interning at the financial information firm S&P Global. All that without a single day of college. Short-term credentials have been around for decades, but in this economic environment, with skyrocketing traditional college costs now beyond the reach of many, they're having a moment. In just a few months, Abdullah began working toward a certificate in UX, or User Experience Design. That certificate can be applied toward a degree in the future, but in the meantime, it will help her escape minimum wage jobs.
And actually allow me to even having a good job, and then I can pay for more education to get more skill done. If only I started with college, I would have to wait 4 years to even have entry-level job in corporate America.
She needs to have economic stability, right?
That's why Gerald Chertavian, the founder and CEO of Year Up, made short-term credentials a key part of his program to give low-income young people a leg up in the job market. As the U.S. economy looks beyond the pandemic, he says, students like Abdullah will be desperately needed to fix a fundamental supply and demand problem in the U.S.
Well, on the supply side, we have 5 million young adults who are out of school, out of work, and don't have more than a high school degree. And on the demand side, we have literally millions of jobs for, let's say, technical jobs, jobs that are require a certain level of skill that are going unfulfilled, and that'll get worse rather than better as we recover from the pandemic.
The pandemic destroyed millions of American jobs for all ages. A third of adults say that if they lost their job, they would need more education to get a new one. And given that lower income workers have been hit the hardest, they'll need to get them quickly, cheaply, and in skills tied directly to available jobs.
When we're looking at the different sutures,
Schools like Columbus State Community College had been working to ramp up shorter-term credential programs for years. Then came COVID-19. Cheryl Hay is Columbus State's executive director of the Office of Talent Strategy.
It's going to become a cornerstone for us because it's about equity and opportunity. Not everyone can stop what they're doing to go to class full-time during the day. And so shorter programming that kind of helps them stair step a little at a time is where we really meet the need.
About 36 million people have completed some college coursework but didn't finish, often leaving their efforts completely unrecognized once they drop out. But now, even big tech wants to drive part of the solution.
We actually co-created the certificate with Amazon
through the command line interface.
After just 4 classes at Santa Monica College, a student like Sophia Baca can earn an industry-recognized certificate in cloud computing skills.
Even if I'm not completed with the 4 classes, I know that there are employers who are willing to hire me as I'm finishing the program.
Those jobs often come with the paychecks between $50,000 and $80,000 per year. Patricia Ramos is the school's Dean of Workforce and Economic Development. She says too few or underemployed workers realize how quickly they can retrain in today's high-tech job landscape.
Not everybody is going to need bachelor's degrees and master's degree and graduate degrees. I think that industries like tech are changing so quickly, right? They say every 6 months, and now it's even faster.
Google recently developed its own short-term career certificates they say will be viewed internally as the equivalent of a 4-year degree. So, could short-term credentials really replace college? For some perspective, I called Jane Oates, the president of Working Nation and a former Obama administration official in the Department of Labor.
If people get the right ones, if they get valuable industry-recognized credentials, they can get a job pretty quickly.
How does that change the landscape when people starting to see their neighbors saying, wait a minute, I went to school for 4 years and this person over here just went for 6 months and we're kind of at the same job?
Well, I think the pandemic could set post-secondary education on its ear because people are really going to look at, is it worth it for me to go for a 2-year or a 4-year degree? Or do these quick credentials that are industry recognized get me a quicker bang for my buck?
But she warns there are thousands of certificates out there. Not all were created equal.
People have been scammed in the past. So people should be very careful when they're selecting a program. make sure that that credential is recognized by other employers.
Yes.
Amina Abdullah will soon graduate the Year Up program and is already working towards 2 certificates.
Every day I said, I deserve to work in corporate America. I deserve to have skills. I deserve to add values. I deserve to do something better for my life.
She'll keep repeating that, she says, one credential at a time until she makes it. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Hari Srinivasan in New York.
So as we continue our panel discussion, we're very happy to have George P. Lesnansky Jr. graduated from Youngstown Cheney High School and Youngstown State University as a Bachelor of Science in Education with a teaching certification in Math and Speech Communications. George has been all over the Youngstown City School Districts. He's been at Woodrow Wilson High School, Adams Junior High School, and even the Rayen School. George was hired by the Brookfield Local Schools in 1997 to serve as the library media specialist, and later both the high school and Brookfield Middle School. In Brookfield, Mr. Lesnansky has taught mathematics. He's advised the YSU English Festival participants. He's supervised the WBHS Warrior TV, and he's found some extra time to serve as the boys bowling coach. Currently, Mr. Lesnansky teaches both at Brookfield High School, Brookfield Middle School, and has students in grades 5 through 12 in computers and technology. But in addition to all those classroom duties, Mr. Lesnansky is the coordinator of the Makerspace, a facility that opened up in January of 2020 and includes more than 20 different machines, including laser cutter and engravers, CNC milling, heat presses, crickets. We've got embroidery machines, vinyl printing, cutters, 3D scanners, 3D printers, and direct-to-garment printers. Lots of things to play with, I guess, in some respects. So we're very happy to have George. George, what have you done? I mean, when you looked at that integration of the Makerspace, talk about timing. So you start that up in January of 2020, and then all of what occurs. You know, what did you see as far as the reason to throw that Makerspace together, and what are you seeing with your students now?
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate that. About 5 years ago, our middle school principal, who's now our superintendent, Toby Gibson, came to me. I was teaching computers and technology, and he said, I'm thinking of putting in a makerspace. What do you think? I have a degree from Kent State University, a Master of Education in Instructional Technology, and I didn't know what he was talking about. So we went to some meetings, we did some research, we looked into it, and I fell in love. It's amazing what you can do today. The machinery, the equipment that used to be, for the most part, off limits for a public school based on finance has now come, the technology has come around where a school district like Brookfield can operate a makerspace. Finance was still a big issue for us. And Mr. Gibson, who went from middle school principal to our superintendent, continued to aggressively pursue funding. We looked for grants. We eventually were awarded the Arconic grant, which was a $60,000 grant in October of 2019. January of 2020, we opened shop. We went with some companies out of Mansfield, Ohio. We purchased the laser cutters, the CNC machines, all of the equipment. We had it installed and up and ready, and we had to learn how to run it. March of 2020, we closed, and we reopened back in the fall of that school year. It's been incredible. I've been in education 33 years. It's probably been the most rewarding time in my career. I see kids with genuine smiles walking out the door with stuff that they created. I hear kids walking out the door frustrated with the next time or what I should have done. And I know as a teacher, when a kid is evaluating his learning at that level, what I should have done or what I would do if I could do this again, we've reached kids. We have them doing stuff, creating stuff that they just don't get a chance to do otherwise.
Talk a bit, and I love that you use this term because I think oftentimes what happens in the maker world is that people say, okay, you know, that it's specifically for that. But you use the term about the integrating that maker space across the curriculum. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. It's been, I use the term magical, and I don't use that term lightly, but we make magic in that room. And one of the things that we really love to do is bring other classes in. We had an English language arts class come in the other day, and the question was, what if? What if the characters in Romeo and Juliet had vanity license plates? So we gave them Adobe Illustrator. We gave them a tutorial on how to create using the graphics in Illustrator. And each kid had to come up with a vanity plate that would be on the back of whatever vehicle they had. We used the vinyl printer cutter to create stickers that were about 6" by 3" in size. And so many of our students have put those on their Chromebooks. They walk around the building with them. We have 5th and 6th graders using the laser cutter. They make little keychains with their name on it. We have students who do 3D printing. We have a drone team who was challenged to make a drone. They had to 3D print it. And when I saw what the challenge was, I'm thinking, and we had 2 kids that did it. And they started out small. They started with a rotor housing. And I warned those kids, I said, look, if you're going to tackle this, it's going to be an awesome project. But I'm going to tell you what, you're going to fail a lot more than you feel like you're succeeding, because as you're building this and the design, everybody thinks you hit a home run the first time you swing a bat. And they prototyped it and printed it, and it didn't work. And then they went back to the drawing board to learn from what they didn't do right. And they built a drone, and we printed it. And they're trying. I show a YouTube video on You Can Do That in SketchUp. SketchUp is an online program kids use for 3D design. And in the video, they show kids in school building a drone. And we're doing that now. It's an incredible time to be in school. The stuff that I see kids doing is just really, really magical.
What's interesting, and it seems the thread that kind of carries through the last 2 speakers and panelists and into you, is this idea of collaboration. I love, how did you, as you approach those other subjects, what was the conversation like to say, I would have loved to have been the fly on the wall when you talk to an English language arts teacher to say, how do you think we can make or connect with what you're doing in your classroom? So tell me a little bit about how that conversation went.
When I was hired in Brookfield as library media specialist, my goal was to get students in the library. And I did that by incorporating the library into the curriculum: math, science, reading, language, music classes. I would somehow convince teachers to bring kids in, and we would get them materials. In the makerspace, it's a similar idea. Currently, my partner Jim Haywood and I are teachers in more than 60 different Google classrooms. We've had English language arts, we've had mathematics classes. Today we had a 7th grade art class. So we have gotten teachers to come up with what if, and using the technologies that we have, we use our laser cutter an awful lot. We can cut balsa, cardboard, plastics, acrylics, foams, and we create things. And what's really, really amazing is when you see kids everything we do is a math problem. Everything we do is an English language arts problem. What font? What size? What do you want it to say? Is it spelled correctly? What if we did it in Spanish? We did some things with Dia de los Muertos back in the fall of the year with our Spanish classes. Everything's a math problem. How big is it? How tall? How long? How wide? We have in our labs measuring devices all over. And you see kids walk in, pick up the tape, and they measure, they figure out, is it going to fit? Where does this belong? How big does it need to be? I say with all honesty, in 33 years of education, this is the most fulfilling job, the most fulfilling place that I've ever been.
Well, it's interesting, and behind the scenes story, it's interesting that you use the baseball analogy. That's all I'll say about that. I think that was awesome that you used that analogy. You talk a bit about Microsoft certification. Where does that fit in with your students on that makerspace side?
In addition to the makerspace, they currently have assigned to me a Microsoft certification course, and students take the course as an elective. They come to the lab and they study using a website called gmetrics.net, and they study the Microsoft curriculum so they can work in Word, Excel, Access, Outlook, and PowerPoint. They go through a series of individually paced modules. No 2 students are in the same place at the same time. And then as they get closer to feeling ready, they take a test through Certiport. And if they pass the exam, it's a 50-minute test typically there's about 40 things that they have to do within the different applications. And within a matter of 2 to 3 minutes, they're notified whether or not they passed. A lot of kids don't pass the first time. So it's another one of those cases where failure is not the end of the road. It's just another step where what did you do that you could have done better? We have students who do earn an industry recognized credential in the Microsoft programs. I have 3 students currently who earn 2 credentials, Excel and Word, PowerPoint and Word, whatever. We have a teacher who has taken and passed the exams. So they now have a badge on their email that indicates they are a Microsoft Office specialist. They have certifications that they can hold and present in job interviews, college applications. Not everybody gets one. It's a challenge, but if you have one, I do think it helps separate you from everyone else as far as something that you can do technology-wise.
George, I can't thank you enough. It certainly seems I feel like I don't do anything with the last 3 panelists that we have. So appreciate all that you do and all that work that you do with your students, and just keep up that great work over there in Brookfield.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our last panelist is Josh Kramer. He joined the NCDMM in 2018 as the Education and Workforce Director for America Makes, and they provide overall program leadership responsibility for all America Makes education and workforce initiatives. Previously, Mr. Kramer served as a Director of Educational Programs at the SME Education Foundation. He's also served for a time as the Interim Executive Director of the Foundation. Prior to joining the SME Education Foundation, Mr. Kramer was a Director of School Engagement, Eastern Region, for Project Lead the Way, a nonprofit organization that provides a transformative learning experience for pre-K-12 students, pre-K through 12 students, and teachers across the U.S. Specifically, Project Lead the Way empowers students to develop in-demand, transportable knowledge and skills through pathways in computer science, engineering, and biomedical science. Mr. Kramer holds a master's in education and a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Tech, a Bachelor of Science in Education from California University of Pennsylvania, as well as an associate's degree in engineering education from Penn State. Mr. Kramer, Josh, thank you so much for joining us. And so far you've been mentioned by 2 out of 3 of our panelists, and it sounds like it's an exciting that we talk with Sandy, both Sandy and Rob, talk about those collaborations. So talk a minute about as America Makes looks at these students that are in high school that want to make that transition. The pandemic hits, there's this learning gap. Where was America Makes in all that?
Yeah, and thank you, Jeff. And first and foremost, I'm actually traveling, so I am running off a cell phone Wi-Fi. So if I freeze or anything, just let me know. But first and foremost, thank you for having me, and excited to join such an esteemed group of folks, and to be very honest and candid. Best practices in closing the pandemic learning gap. What an awesome group of people. And thanks for having this conversation tonight, especially. And I think that one of the things that America Makes, which is the National Innovation Institute for 3D printing, we are part of Manufacturing USA, which is a public-private partnership, stood up by Congress to tackle problems in the maturation and adoption of additive manufacturing for our country, and competitiveness in U.S. manufacturing. And so when the pandemic hit, we were right there rolling up our sleeves to tackle these issues. We look at workforce and we look at talent that's coming up just as much as we look at, supply chain issues. And so it's critically important that we as a nation have talent to fulfill the skills gap that we have, and to fulfill really what is a perception gap as well. So when we look at folks across some of these critical partners that we've heard from tonight and the great work that they're doing, we really look at it as, our blessed privilege to be a part, to bring some assets and to bring some of these resources to these folks to help them succeed. And that's really our mission here in education and workforce development, is to be here for every learner, where they learn, how they learn, and celebrate these best practices that we can bring from the Institute, from the national level, into these local communities as well.
So it's 2018, and you're part of America Makes. So obviously the environment looks very different when you were dealing with on a national level, as well as that connection that you've made on the local level with schools and districts and students and teachers. So tell us a little bit about what it was like back then in the days before pre-pandemic days, and then what you saw as a difference, and maybe even what you kind of did. We use the word pivot a lot, and I'm an old basketball guy, so I'll use pivot a lot. And what did America Makes kind of do to pivot and help these districts and these students, that were kind of on the, dealing with that whole pandemic issue? So what was it like pre-pandemic, and then what did all of you do to try to adjust accordingly during the pandemic?
Yeah, and you froze just a bit, so I'm going to catch up. But I think one of the things we're going to talk about is kind of what changed, right? And how did we pivot in that critical moment? And I think one of the things that's changed and has been changing is the perception that we know that there is a critical need, and that students, especially and youth especially, are choosing manufacturing based on, one, a dynamic experience for themselves, two, that champion at home, a parent, guardian, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa. We know that they're choosing that based on their champion at school and a friend, right, at school. We know there are four big factors. And so we want to make sure that we're really focused on that. We want to make sure that we're articulating that programs and curricula and teachers training programs, and you've heard some really fantastic programs here this evening, are tailored to meet the needs of industry, and our Department of Defense, right? That is a huge factor in U.S. competitiveness and manufacturing as well. And so some of the things that we did initially was, again, when we talk about meeting learners where they learn and how they learn, we recognize right away of being able to, leverage some of the best technology tools out there to bring learning to these students, and including different approaches. So meaning that, we move to micro learning where we're breaking these up into bite-sized pieces that students can digest and bringing them to their homes, but also then creating dynamic partnerships where these students can access the technology, and we're still driving with a problem-based approach and hands-on approach, because we know that that practical application makes learning real and relevant. You heard George and Rob and Sandy talk about a lot of these things, but when students, see the relevance and the real world application of these things, it concretes that learning. And that's really critical. And that's a lot of the things that we drive. We know that there is a tremendous opportunity for students across the additive manufacturing landscape. We know that we can serve as a great entry point into advanced manufacturing as well, with a lot of cross-disciplinary competencies. And so a lot of these students are gaining competencies that they can use in many different facets, many different roles and jobs as well. And so, we drive to that in a big way. We set a lot of national kind of, guidance and direction on those things, and really root this in the voice of industry. And I think you heard Rob mention this specifically, right? Tying that into all of our America Makes members across the United States as well as Northeast Ohio. Which we have many, so that we can then tie this directly into a job role for a student or an adult for that matter.
So obviously, when you use the term additive manufacturing, is there a part of what you do to help students recognize what the individual careers are within those manufacturing areas? I mean, is there a move afoot, because here I am, much older than the students that you're working with, and I'm going, I wonder what I can do in that additive manufacturing field. What kind of efforts do you have in that, I guess more that educational side, right, with your students?
Yeah, and I mean, for us, critically, it starts with awareness, right? I mean, folks don't know what they don't know. And so a lot of that is an educational outreach type component to really talk about the careers and the roles and the competencies, the knowledge, skills, and abilities behind those roles, right? What are these folks interested in? What are their hobbies? What are their passions? How did they get here? I mean, one of the really cool things, I'm traveling to a big event called Rapid, which is a huge 3D printing event, and getting to meet all of the folks and see a lot of familiar faces. But when you learn about their paths, they're all zigzags, and they all have, everyone's taken a different path. And even if we went through just the folks that are on the meet, in this call tonight, in this webinar, how we've gotten here is a zigzag path. And so the better and the more that we can amplify that and show students that there are many ways, right, to get to a promising career. And there are promising careers in advanced manufacturing, and we're launching a couple of key initiatives to introduce not only students but their parents and mainstream adults into these careers, as well as the competencies and crosswalk those for them. So we at America Makes will have some of these resources we'll put in the hands of these not only great organizations, but as well as the classroom as well.
Josh, I so appreciate your time, and I can't say enough to George and to Sandy and to Rob. Appreciate your time this evening to talk. It's exciting when we all talk about that collaborative effort, and whether it was George talking about that connection and Josh and Sandy and Rob all talking about how they made those connections. That's what really came out to me as far as that difference that they've made, or you all make, in those lives of those students as they kind of deal with this whole I lost a lot of learning along the way, and how can I make up for that? So I can't thank all of you enough. I thank our audience if this evening about watching, and those folks that will watch this on a later time, our series of webinars that focus on this best practices in closing the pandemic learning gap in Ohio schools. Boy, we really appreciated the input from our panel this evening. Keep in mind, like I said when the program started, this is all part of resources that are available on our website. If you look on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a URL that'll connect with tonight's webinar as well as the last 3 webinars that we did. We're also creating a series of podcasts that take a deeper dive into many of the subjects that we've covered on these webinars. And you know what? Those are also available on our website. Our last webinar of the series, I can't believe we've done 5, which will focus on the work our Ohio districts are doing to combat this that pandemic learning gap with our special needs students. That'll take place on Tuesday, June 7th, 6 to 7 o'clock. I hope you can have an opportunity to join us then. We thank the Broadcast Educational Media Commission, as well as working with, in collaboration with the Ohio Department of Education, who really made this project possible, as well as the panelists. So from the staff of PBS Western Reserve, we thank you for your time viewing, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thanks so much.